Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Kassy, and I'm so happy you're here. Tonight we're continuing the Russian tales Candlelight Whispering, and I will be reading you to sleep with a wonderful tale called Sadko. It is about a young guy who lived in Novgorod, and he was very poor. He was a musician that loved to play and sing to the river. In his opinion, the Volkhov River was prettier than any girl in Novgorod. The poor guy turned into a rich merchant by the doings of a mystical Caesar, and that's where the tale gets especially magical. But I will let you find that out on your own, as I will whisper this wonderful tale to you. Okay, let's get comfortable and begin. Sadko. In Novgorod, in the old days, there was a young man, just a boy he was, the son of a rich merchant who had lost all his money and died. So Sadko was very poor. He had not a koyback in the world except what the people gave him when he played his dulcimer for their dancing. He had blue eyes and curling hair, and he was strong and would have been merry. But it is dull work playing for other folk to dance, and Sadko dared not to dance with any young girl, for he had no money to marry on, and he had not one to be chased away as a beggar. And the young women in Novgorod, they never looked at the handsome Sadko. No, they smiled with their bright eyes at the young man and danced with them, and if they ever spoke to Sadko, it was just to tell him sharply to keep the music going or to play faster. So Sadko lived alone with his dulcimer and made do with half of a loaf when he could not get a whole, and with crust when he had no crumb. He did not mind so much when he came to him so long as he could play his dulcimer and walk along the banks of the little river Volkhov that flowed by the Novgorod, or on the shores of the lake, making music for himself and seeing the pale mists rise over the water and dawn or sunset across the shining river. There's no girl in Novgorod as pretty as my little river, he used to say, and night after night he would sit by the banks of the river or on the shores of the lake, playing the dulcimer and singing to himself. Sometimes he helped the fishermen on the lake, and they would give him a little fish for his supper in a payment for his strong young arms. And it happened that one evening the fishermen asked him to watch their nets for them on the shore while they went off to take their fish to sell them in the square of the Novgorod. Sadko sat on the shore on the rock and played his dulcimer and sang. Very sweetly he sang of the fair lake and the lovely river, the little river that he thought prettier than all the girls of Novgorod. And while he was singing, he saw a whirlpool in the lake, little waves flying from it across the river, and in the middle of a hollow down into the water. And in the hollow he saw the head of a great man with blue hair and gold crown. He knew that the huge man was the Tsar of the sea, and the man came nearer, walking up out of the depth of the lake, a huge, great man, a very giant, with blue hair falling to his waist over his broad shoulders. The little waves ran from him in all directions as he came striding up out of the water. Sadko did not know whether to run or stay, but the Tsar of the sea called out to him in a great voice like wind and water in a storm. Sadko of Novgorod, you have played and sung many days by the side of the lake and on the banks of the little river Volkhov. My daughter loves your music, and it has pleased me too. Throw out a net into the water and draw it in, and the waters will pay you for singing. And if you're satisfied with the payment, you must come and play to us down in the green palace of the sea. With that, the Tsar of the sea went down again into the waters of the lake. The waves closed over him, a roar, and presently the lake was as smooth as calm as it had ever been. Sadko thought and said to himself, well, there's no harm done in casting out a net. So he threw a net out into the lake. He sat down again and played on his dulcimer and sang. And when he had finished his singing, the dusk had fallen, and the moon shone over the lake. He put down his dulcimer and took hold of the ropes of the net, and began to draw it out of the silver water. Easily the ropes came, and the net dripping and glittering in the moonlight. I was dreaming, said Sadko. I was asleep when I saw the Tsar of the sea, and there's nothing in the net at all. And then, just as the last of the net was coming ashore, he saw something in it, square and dark. He dragged it out and found it was a cover. He opened the cover, and it was full of precious stones, green, red, gold, gleaming in the light of the moon. Diamonds shone there little like bundles of sharp knives. There can be no harm in taking these stones, said Sadko, whether I dreamed or not. He took the cover on his shoulder and bent under the weight of it. Strong though he was, he put it in a safe place. All night he sat and watched by the nets, and played and sang, and planned what he would do. In the morning the fishermen came, laughing and merry after their night in Novgorod, and they gave him a little fish for watching their nets, and he made a fire on the shore, and cooked it and ate it as he used to do. And that is my last meal as a poor man, says Sadko. Ah me, who knows if I shall be happier? Then he set the cover on his shoulder and tramped away for Novgorod. Who is that? They asked at the gates. Only Sadka, the dulcimer player, he replied. Turn porter, said they. One trade is as good as another, said Sadko, and he walked into the city. He sold a few of the stones, 2 at a time, and with what he got for them, he set up a booth in the market. Small things led to great, and he was soon one of the richest traders in Novgorod. And now there was not a girl in town who could look too sweetly at Sadko. He has golden hair, says one, blue eyes like sea, says another. He could lift the world on his shoulders, says a third. A little money, you see, opens everybody's eyes. But Sadko was not changed by his good fortune. Still he walked and played by the little river Volkhov. When work was done and the traders gone, Sadko would take his dulcimer and play and sing on the banks of the river. And still he said, there's no girl in Novgorod as pretty as my little river. Every time he came back from his long voyages, for he was trading far and near like the greatest of merchants, he went at once to the banks of the river to see how his sweetheart doing, and always he brought some little present for her and threw it into the waves. For 12 years he lived unmarried in Novgorod, and every year made voyages, buying and selling, and always growing richer and richer. Many were the mothers in Novgorod who would have liked to see him married to their daughters. Many were the pillows that were wet with the tears of the young girls as they thought of the blue eyes of Sadko and his golden hair. And then in the 12 years since he walked into Novgorod with the cover on his shoulder, he was sailing in a ship on the Caspian Sea. Far, far away For many days the ship sailed on, and Sadko sat on the deck and played his dulcimer and sang of Novgorod and of the little river Volkhov that flows under the walls of the town. Blue was the Caspian Sea, and the waves were like furrow in a field, long lines of white under the steady wind, while the sails swelled and the ship shot over the water. And suddenly the ship stopped. In the middle of the sea, far from land, the ship stopped and trembled in the waves, as if she were holding by a big hand. "We are aground," cried the sailors, and the captain, the great one, tells them to take soundings. 70 fathom by the bow it was, and 70 fathoms by the stem. "We're not aground," says the captain, "unless there's a rock striking up like a needle in the middle of the Caspian Sea." "There's magic in this," said the sailors. "Hoist more sail," says the captain, and up go the white sails, swaying out in the wind, while the masts bend and creak. But still the ship lay shivering and did not move, out in the middle of the sea. "Hoist more sail," says the captain, and up go to the white sails, swelling and tugging, while the masts creak and groan, but still the ship lay there shivering and did not move. "There's an unlucky one abroad," says an old sailor. "We must draw lots and find him, and throw him overboard into the sea." The other sailors agreed to this, and still Sadko sat and played his dulcimer and sang. The sailors got pieces of string, all of a length as many as there were souls in the ship, and one of those strings they cut in half. Then they made them in a bundle, and each man plucked one string, and Sadko stopped his playing for a moment to pluck a string, and his was the string that had been cut in half. "Magician, sorcerer, unclean one," shouted the sailors. "Not so," said Sadko. "I remember now an old promise I made, and I will keep it willingly." He took his dulcimer in his hand and leapt from the ship into the blue Caspian Sea. The waves and scarcely closed over his head before the ship shot forward again, and flew over the waves like swan's feather, and came in the end safely to her harbor. Sadko dropped into the waves, and the waves closed over him. Down he sunk, like a pebble thrown into the pool, down and down. First the water was blue, then green, then strange fish with goggle eyes and golden fins swam round him as he sang. He came at last to the bottom of the sea, and there, on the bottom of the sea, was a palace built of green wood. Yes, all the timbers of all the ships that have been wrecked in all the seas of the world are in that place, and they're all green and cunningly fitted together, so that the palace is worth a 10-day journey only to see it. And in front of the palace, Sadko saw 2 big cobble sturgeons, each 150 feet long, lashing their tails and guarding the gates. Now sturgeons are the oldest of all fish, and these were the oldest of all sturgeons. Sadko walked between the sturgeons and thought the gates of the palace, and through the gates of the palace. Inside there was a great hall, and the Tsar of the sea lay resting in the hall, with his gold crown on his head, and his blue floating round him, and his blue hair floating round him in the water, and his great body covered with scales, lying along the hall. The Tsar of the sea filled the hall, and there is room in that hall for a village. And there were fish swimming this way and that, in and out of the windows. "Oh, Sadko," says the Tsar of the sea, You took what the sea gave you, but you have been a long time in coming to sing in the palaces of the sea. 12 years I have lain here waiting for you. Great Tsar, forgive, said Sadko. Sing now, says the Tsar of the sea, and his voice was like the beating of the waves. And Sadko played on his dulcimer and sang. He sang of Novgorod, of the little river Volga, which he loved. It was in his song that none of the girls of Novgorod were as pretty as the little river. And there was the sound of wind over the lake in his song, the sound of ripples under the prow of a boat, the sound of ripples onto the shore, the sound of the river flowing past the dull reeds, the whispering sound of the river at night. And all the time he played cunningly on the dulcimer. The girls of Novgorod had never danced to so sweet a tune when in the old days Sadko played his dulcimer to earn koybag and crust of bread. Never had the Tsar of the sea heard such music. I would dance, said the Tsar of the sea, and he stood up like a tall tree in the hall. Play on, said the Tsar of the sea, and he strode through the gates. The sturgeons guarding the gates steered the waters with their tails. And if the Tsar of the sea was huge in the hall, he was bigger still when he stood outside of the bottom of the sea. He grew taller and taller, towering like a mountain. His feet were like small hills. His blue hair hung down to his waist, and he was covered with green scales. And he began to dance on the bottom of the sea. Great was that dancing. The sea boiled and ships went down. The waves rolled as big as houses. The sea overflowed its shores, and while down under the water as the Tsar danced mightily on the bottom of the sea. Hither and hither rushed the waves, and the very earth shook at the dancing of the tremendous Tsar. He danced till he was tired, and then he came back to the palace of green wood, and past the sturgeons, and shrunk into himself, and came through the gates into the hall, while Sadko still played on his dulcimer and sang. You have played well and given me pleasure, said the Tsar of the sea. I have 30 daughters, and you shall choose one and marry her, and be a prince of the sea. Better than all maidens, I love my little river, says Sadko, and the Tsar of the sea laughed, and threw his head back with his blue hair floating all over. And then there came in 30 daughters of the Tsar of the sea. Beautiful they were, lovely and graceful, but 29 of them passed by, and Sadko fingered his dulcimer and thought of his little river. There came in the 30th, and Sadko cried out aloud, Here's the only maiden in the world as pretty as my little river. And she looked at him with eyes that shone like stars reflected in the river. Her hair was dark like the river at night. She laughed, and her voice was like flowing off the river. And what is the name of your little river, says the Tsar. It is the river Volkhov that flows by Novgorod, says Sadko. But your daughter is as fair as the little river, and I would gladly marry her if she would have me. It is a strange thing, said the Tsar, but Volkhov is the name of my younger daughter. He put Sadko's hand in the hand of his daughter, and they kissed each other. And as they kissed, Sadko saw a necklace around her neck, and knew it was one that he had thrown into the river as a present for his sweetheart. She smiled, and come, says she, and took him away to a palace of her own, and showed him a coffer, and in that coffer were bracelets and rings and earrings, all the gifts that he had thrown into the river. And Sadko laughed for joy and kissed the youngest daughter of the Tsar of the sea, and she kissed him back. Oh, my little river, says he, there's no girl in the world but you as pretty as my little river. Well, they were married, and the Tsar of the sea laughed at the wedding feast till the palace shook and the fish swam off in all directions. And after the feast, Sadko and his bride went off together to the palace. And before they slept, she kissed him very tenderly, and she said, "Oh, Sadko, you will not forget me. You will play to me sometime and sing." "I shall never lose sight of you, my pretty one," says he. "And as for music, I will sing and play all day long." "That as may be," says she, and they fell asleep. And in the middle of the night, Sadko happened to turn in bed, and he touched the princess with his left foot, and she was cold, cold, cold as ice in January. And with that touch of cold, he woke, and he was lying under the walls of Novgorod with his dulcimer in his hand, and one of his feet was in the little river Volkhov, and the moon was shining. There are many tales about how this tale ends. Some say he went into the town and lived on alone until he died. But I think with those who say that he took his dulcimer and swam out into the middle of the river and sank underwater again, looking for his little princess. They say he found her and still lives in the green palaces of the bottom of the sea. And when there is a big storm, you may know that Sadko is playing on his dulcimer and singing, and the Tsar of the Sea is dancing his tremendous dance down there on the bottom, under the waves. And there you go, that's the tale of the Sadko. I hope you enjoyed this tale as much as I do. It's just such a positive reading. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the Candlelight, my soothing voice, and the Russian tale. And I hope listening to my whispering will help you get a wonderful, peaceful sleep tonight. I am planning to release my Russian tale Candlelight readings every Wednesday night and continue to share with you my motivational Candlelight readings every Sunday night. So make sure to come back for the magical Russian tales next Wednesday. And if you haven't watched my motivational readings yet, please take a moment to enjoy those. Once again,